Jake Morrison stood in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime and watched as hundreds of alien beings filled the curved seats that rose like an amphitheater around the central floor where he waited alone. The air hummed with translators working overtime to convert dozens of different languages into something his human ears could understand. He had been Earth's ambassador for 3 years now, but had never seen the chamber this full or this tense. Supreme Chancellor Zaktar rose from the highest seat. The insectoid being stood nearly 10 feet tall with 4 arms and compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. His voice boomed through the chamber with a sound like grinding metal mixed with wind chimes. Jake had learned to read the subtle movements of Zaktar's antennae, which showed the Chancellor was very serious today. "Ambassador Morrison," Zaktar began, and his words echoed off the crystal walls. "We have called this emergency session to address a matter of grave concern to all civilized species in this galaxy." Jake nodded politely and kept his expression neutral, even though he already knew what was coming. Earth's intelligence networks had been monitoring Council communications for months. Dr. Lisa Bennett had warned him this day would arrive sooner than anyone wanted. "The human species has advanced too rapidly," Zaktar continued. "In 50 standard years since first contact, your people have developed quantum technologies that took other species millennia to achieve. This rate of progress threatens the stability of our established order." Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. Jake could see representatives from 12 different species, all nodding in agreement. The Zarathi, with their scaled skin and glowing red eyes, seemed particularly agitated. General Thexamore of the Saurian Empire sat forward in his seat, and his reptilian features showed clear hostility. "Therefore," Zaktar's voice grew louder, "the Council has reached a unanimous decision. Humanity must surrender all advanced quantum research to Council oversight. Earth must accept permanent Council administrators to govern your technological development. You have 30 standard days to comply." The chamber fell silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in the sudden quiet. He looked around at the alien faces staring down at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed contempt. Some species had clearly been waiting for this moment. "And if we refuse?" Jake asked in a calm voice that carried clearly through the vast space. Zaktar's antennae twitched in what Jake recognized as satisfaction. "Then humanity will be declared a threat to galactic peace. The combined fleets of the Council will reduce Earth and all human colonies to ash. Your species will be remembered only as a cautionary tale for others who might challenge the natural order." Jake smiled. It was a small, gentle smile that seemed completely out of place in the threatening atmosphere of the chamber. Several alien delegates shifted uncomfortably at the sight of it. Humans were still new enough to the galactic community that their expressions were often misunderstood. "I see," Jake said, and his smile never wavered. 30 days. "You seem remarkably calm for someone whose species faces extinction," observed Counselor Vexhigh of the Crystalline Collective. Her voice rang like crystal bells, but with an edge of suspicion. Jake's smile widened just slightly. "I'm simply processing the information. Chancellor, this is certainly an unexpected development." That was a lie, of course. Earth had been expecting this ultimatum for 2 years. Dr. Bennett and her team had been working day and night preparing for exactly this scenario. Admiral Paul Carter had been repositioning Earth's defense forces. President Karen White had been coordinating with colony governors. They all knew this day would come. "You will return to Earth immediately," Zaktar commanded. "Present our terms to your leaders. We expect a formal response within the allotted time." Jake bowed slightly in the human fashion, which caused some confused chittering among the alien observers. "Of course, Chancellor. I'll convey your message exactly as stated." As Jake turned to leave the chamber, he activated a small device hidden in his jacket. To anyone watching, it would look like he was adjusting his collar, but the motion sent a coded quantum burst toward Earth. The message was simple but vital. 3 words that would set everything in motion. Operation Checkmate. Go. The journey back to Earth took 6 days through the established hyperspace corridors. Jake spent most of the time in his quarters aboard the diplomatic transport reviewing files that Dr. Bennett had prepared months ago. The technical specifications were beyond his understanding, but the implications were clear enough. Humanity was not what the Council thought they were. When Jake's ship emerged from hyperspace near Luna Station, he was met by Admiral Carter's flagship. The massive vessel looked insignificant next to Council dreadnoughts, but Jake knew appearances could be deceiving. Admiral Carter himself was waiting in the docking bay when Jake's shuttle arrived. "How did they take it?" Carter asked, as they walked toward the command center. "About as expected," Jake replied. Zach Tar seemed almost pleased to deliver the ultimatum. "I think he's been waiting for an excuse to put humanity in its place?" Carter nodded grimly. "They're already mobilizing fleets according to our intelligence reports. General Thexmore is pulling ships from across Saurian space." They entered the command center where President Karen White was waiting along with Defense Secretary Rick Hayes and Dr. Lisa Bennett. The room's main screen showed a real-time map of known space with red dots marking Council fleet movements. "Madam President," Jake said formally, "the Council has demanded our surrender." President White looked around at the assembled group. Her expression was serious but not worried. "Are we ready, Dr. Bennett?" Dr. Bennett smiled the same enigmatic expression that Jake had worn in the Council chamber. "The volunteers have been prepared. The quantum field generators are online. We've been ready for months." "How many people know the truth?" President White asked. "About 12,000 across all the colonies," Carter replied. "All volunteers, all tested, all trained." President White nodded slowly. "Then let's show them what humanity really is." The next morning, Earth's response was transmitted to every Council world simultaneously. President White herself delivered the message standing in the rose garden of the White House with Earth's blue sky and green trees visible behind her. "To the Galactic Council," she began, "humanity appreciates your concern for galactic stability. However, we must respectfully decline your generous offer of supervision. We have evolved beyond the need for such guidance. Earth will remain free and independent. We suggest the Council reconsider its position." The transmission ended, and across human space, a new chapter began. In laboratories and military bases and colony ships scattered throughout the solar system, 12,000 humans began to demonstrate abilities that would change everything. The galaxy thought it knew about the nature of consciousness and reality itself. The Council had demanded surrender, but humanity had simply smiled because they knew something no other species in the galaxy had yet discovered. Evolution was not about technology or weapons or fleets of starships. Evolution was about transcendence. General Thexmore stood on the bridge of his flagship Eternal Dominance and watched as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled around him. 50,000 warships from 12 different species filled the space near the Xerian Nebula like a metal constellation of death and destruction. The General's reptilian features showed deep satisfaction as more ships continued to arrive through hyperspace. The Zarathi had contributed their entire plasma fleet. Their ships gleamed like polished obsidian with energy weapons that could melt through any known material. Admiral Kesthor commanded them from his massive battle carrier, and his scaled face showed eager anticipation for the coming battle. The Vorthon delegation brought their famous shield ships. These vessels could project protective barriers large enough to cover entire planets. Their commander Sectile had assured the general that no human weapon could penetrate Vorthon defensive technology. The Crystalline Collective provided the most terrifying weapons of all. Their planet-cracking mining equipment had been modified for war. Ships that normally stripped asteroids for minerals could now reduce entire worlds to cosmic dust in a matter of hours. Even the peaceful Aquarian Federation had sent representatives. Their bioships grew from living coral and could repair themselves during battle. Commander Felnara spoke for them with a voice like rushing water, but her words carried the same message as all the others. Humanity must be stopped. General Thexmore called a conference of all fleet commanders aboard his flagship. The war room was massive enough to accommodate beings from dozens of different worlds and atmospheric requirements. Translation devices worked overtime to convert the babble of alien languages into something approaching understanding. "This will not be like other campaigns," the general began. "Humanity has shown dangerous innovation in the past 50 years. We must assume they will attempt some form of resistance." "What resistance can they offer?" Admiral Kesthor hissed through his translator. "They have perhaps 200 ships total. We bring 50,000. Their quantum technology is concerning," added Sectale of the Vorthons. Our intelligence suggests they have made advances we do not fully understand. Commander Felnara's coral-like features shifted into what might have been worry. The Aquarian Science Collective has tried to analyze human quantum signatures. The readings are unlike anything in our databases. General Thexmore raised one clawed hand for silence. Intelligence reports suggest humans have been conducting experiments in consciousness research. This is meaningless. Consciousness cannot deflect plasma cannons or penetrate shield generators. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled. Commanders. The galaxy had seen many young species attempt to find alternatives to conventional warfare. All had failed when faced with the overwhelming technological superiority of the established council races. Our strategy is simple, the general continued. We will emerge from hyperspace at the edge of their solar system. We will demand immediate surrender. When they refuse, we will demonstrate our power by destroying their outer colonies first. Mars and the Jupiter stations will be eliminated to show we are serious. Then we will give them one final chance before sterilizing Earth itself. The plan was approved unanimously. Fleet commanders returned to their ships and began final preparations. Weapons were charged, shields were tested, troops were briefed. The greatest military force in galactic history prepared to crush humanity once and for all. Meanwhile, in human space, something very different was happening. Captain Steve Rogers maintained his regular patrol route along the outer system aboard. His ship, Horizon's Edge. The vessel appeared to be a standard human frigate with conventional fusion engines and basic defensive systems. Council intelligence officers monitoring human communications found nothing unusual in Rogers' routine reports to Earth Command. What they could not detect was the change happening aboard Rogers' ship and on similar vessels throughout human space. The crew of 43 had all volunteered for something called Project Awakening 2 years ago. They understood they were participating in humanity's defense, but the full scope of their transformation was still unfolding. Engineering Chief Matt Johnson discovered his abilities first during a routine maintenance check. He was working on a damaged power coupling when he noticed he could feel the flow of energy through the ship's systems. At first he thought it was imagination, but gradually he realized he could actually influence the flow with his thoughts. Small adjustments at first, then larger ones, until he could optimize the entire ship's power grid just by concentrating. Navigator Susan Davis made her breakthrough while plotting a course through an asteroid field. She found herself anticipating the location of space rocks before sensors could detect them. Then she began seeing hyperspace routes that did not appear on any star chart. Eventually, she realized she was perceiving space-time itself in ways that conventional instruments could not measure. Security Chief Tony Lewis was practicing combat drills when his enhancement manifested. An equipment malfunction caused a training laser to fire at full power directly at his head. Instinctively, he raised his hand and a shimmering barrier appeared between him and the deadly beam. The laser dispersed harmlessly around the energy field he had unconsciously generated. Similar awakenings were happening throughout human space. On Mars colony, atmospheric engineer Nina Clark found she could purify air with focused thought. On Europa Research Station, physicist Alex Turner discovered he could manipulate matter at the quantum level. In asteroid mining facilities, workers learned they could extract precious metals without machinery. Dr. Lisa Bennett coordinated all these developments from her laboratory complex beneath the Swiss Alps. Her team had been studying the phenomenon for years, but the acceleration in recent months exceeded all projections. Humans were not just developing psychic abilities. They were evolving beyond the need for technology itself. The breakthrough had come from studying near-death experiences and deep meditation states. Dr. Bennett discovered that human consciousness could interface directly with quantum fields that underlied all physical reality. Other species had brains, but humans had something unique. Their neural structure allowed them to access dimensions of existence that remained closed to other forms of life. "How many are showing active abilities?" Admiral Carter asked during his daily briefing. 12,000 confirmed so far, Doctor," Bennett replied. "But we estimate another 100,000 are beginning to show early signs. The effect seems to be spreading." "Spreading how?" "We think it's quantum entanglement at the consciousness level," Dr. Bennett explained. "When one human learns to access these fields, it creates a resonance effect that makes it easier for others. It's like the entire species is awakening together." President White reviewed the latest reports with growing amazement. Can we be sure this will work against Council weapons? We've tested against simulated plasma cannons and shield generators, Dr. Bennett said. The results are promising, but we won't know for certain until we face the real thing. Admiral Carter pulled up tactical displays showing Council fleet movements. They're almost ready to move. Intelligence suggests they'll reach our system within the week. President White looked out the window of the Oval Office at the peaceful Earth afternoon. Children were playing on the White House lawn, while tourists took pictures and security agents stood watch. Soon this world might be under attack by the largest military force in galactic history. But humanity was no longer the primitive species. The Council remembered. Dr. Bennett, the President said quietly, are your people ready? Dr. Bennett smiled with confidence that seemed to come from somewhere beyond normal human experience. Madam President, they've been ready for 2 years. They just didn't know it yet. The Council fleet completed its final preparations and began the jump toward Sol system. 50,000 ships carrying death and destruction toward a small blue world whose inhabitants had dared to challenge the established order of the galaxy. They expected to find terrified humans hiding behind inadequate defenses. Instead, they would discover something that would change their understanding of what was possible in the universe. The change began on Mars Colony 3 days before the Council fleet was scheduled to arrive. Dr. Nina Clark was working in the Atmospheric Processing Center when she felt something shift deep inside her consciousness. The sensation was like waking up from a dream she had not realized she was having. Suddenly, she could perceive the entire Martian atmosphere as a living system of interconnected energy flows. She reached out with her mind and touched the ancient red dust that had covered Mars for millions of years. For the first time in her life, she understood that matter and consciousness were not separate things, but different aspects of the same fundamental reality. The boundary between her thoughts and the physical world dissolved. Nina opened her eyes and watched as the air around her began to shimmer. Oxygen levels throughout the colony started climbing without any input from the processing machines. She was purifying the atmosphere directly with focused intention. Her colleagues stared in amazement as readings showed air quality improving, beyond anything their technology could achieve. Similar awakenings were happening throughout human space. On Europa Research Station, physicist Alex Turner was analyzing quantum field equations when the mathematics suddenly made perfect sense at a level beyond mere intellectual understanding. He could see the underlying structure of reality itself. The equations were not just symbols on a screen, but descriptions of the living fabric from which all existence emerged. Alex stood up from his workstation and walked to the laboratory window that looked out over the frozen surface of Jupiter's moon. He pressed his palm against the reinforced glass and felt the molecular structure respond to his touch. The transparent aluminum began to shift and change, becoming harder and more transparent simultaneously. He was improving the material by interacting with it at the quantum level. In the asteroid belt, mining engineer Tony Lewis was testing new extraction techniques when his enhanced abilities manifested completely. He had been trying to separate precious metals from ordinary rock using conventional tools when suddenly he realized the tools were unnecessary. He could feel the atomic structure of the asteroid and identify every element it contained. Tony focused, his attention on a vein of platinum running through the rock face. The metal began to flow like liquid, separating cleanly from the surrounding stone without heat or pressure or chemical processing. He was extracting pure elements by convincing their atoms to organize differently. The impossible had become routine. Dr. Lisa Bennett monitored these developments from her command center deep beneath the Swiss Alps. Her banks of quantum sensors showed energy signatures unlike anything in recorded science. Humans were not just developing psychic powers. They were learning to manipulate the fundamental forces that shaped reality itself. The process seemed to accelerate as more people awakened. Each new consciousness that accessed the quantum field made it easier for others to follow. The effect rippled through human colonies like a wave of evolution spreading across space and time. "The readings are off all our scales," reported her assistant, Dr. Karen Hughes. "Whatever the volunteers are doing, it's creating quantum resonance patterns we've never seen before." Dr. Bennett studied the data streaming across her displays. 12,000 humans were now showing active abilities, with thousands more manifesting new capabilities every day. The transformation was happening faster than anyone had predicted. It's like the entire species is awakening from a long sleep, she said, quietly. Admiral Paul Carter arrived at the command center with updates from military installations throughout the solar system. His expression showed a mixture of excitement and concern that reflected the magnitude of what humanity was experiencing. Captain Rogers reports his entire crew can now interface directly with their ship's systems, Carter said. They don't need control panels or computers anymore. They're operating the vessel through pure thought. What about weapons and defense? Systems, Dr. Bennett asked. That's where it gets interesting. The volunteers don't seem interested in traditional weapons. They're developing abilities that make conventional warfare obsolete. Dr. Bennett pulled up a secure communication link to Mars Colony, where Nina Clark was conducting the latest experiments. The atmospheric engineer appeared on screen surrounded by a faint aura of energy that cameras could barely detect. Nina, what's your status? Dr. Bennett asked. It's incredible, Lisa. I can feel every particle in the Martian atmosphere. I can adjust pressure and composition across the entire planet just by focusing my attention. We don't need terraforming equipment anymore. I can make Mars breathable for normal humans in a matter of weeks. The implications were staggering. If humans could manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level, they would not need starships or weapons or any of the technology that other species depended upon. They were evolving into something completely new. President Karen White received hourly briefings on the awakening process. But even she was unprepared for what happened next. She was meeting with her cabinet in the Oval Office when every enhanced human on Earth suddenly went silent and still. For 30 seconds, 12,000 people stopped what they were doing and looked toward space. What's happening? The president asked Dr. Bennett over the emergency communication system. The Council fleet just entered our sensor range, Dr. Bennett replied. Every awakened human felt their arrival simultaneously. We're all connected now through the quantum field. Captain Steve Rogers stood on the bridge of Horizon's Edge and felt the massive Council armada emerge from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. 50,000 warships carrying enough firepower to sterilize 100 worlds appeared like a deadly constellation against the stars. His enhanced senses could perceive each vessel individually, along with the thoughts and intentions of their crews. They're afraid, Rogers said to his navigation officer, Susan Davis. The Council commanders expected to find primitive humans cowering behind inadequate defenses. Instead, they're detecting energy signatures they don't understand. Susan nodded, and her enhanced perception showed her the quantum fields surrounding each Council ship. Their weapons are impressive, but they depend on conventional physics. Plasma cannons and shield generators work by manipulating matter and energy in predictable ways. And we're beyond predictable now. Rogers smiled. Throughout human space, the awakened were sharing information instantaneously through quantum entanglement at the consciousness level. Every discovery made by one person immediately became available to all others. Nina Clark's atmospheric manipulation techniques were learned by volunteers on a dozen different worlds. Alex Turner's matter restructuring abilities were replicated by engineers throughout the solar system. Dr. Bennett realized humanity was not just gaining individual psychic powers. They were becoming a collective intelligence that could operate at the speed of thought across interstellar distances. The species was evolving into something the galaxy had never seen before. General Thexmore studied sensor readings from his flagship and tried to understand what his instruments were telling him. Human space showed energy patterns that defied explanation. Their colonies were generating quantum signatures that matched no known technology. What are they doing? He demanded of his science officers. Unknown General. The readings suggest they're manipulating space-time itself, but that should be impossible with their level of technological development. The General's reptilian features showed growing unease. He had expected to find desperate humans preparing hopeless defenses against overwhelming odds. Instead, he found energy signatures that his most advanced sensors could not properly analyze. "Send the ultimatum," he ordered. "Demand their immediate surrender." The message was transmitted across all communication frequencies. General Thexmore appeared on screens throughout human space with the same threatening presence that had intimidated younger species for thousands of years. "Humans of Earth System, this is General Thexmore commanding the Council Enforcement Fleet. You are surrounded by 50,000 warships representing the combined military might of 12 species. Surrender immediately and submit to Council authority or face total annihilation. You have 1 hour to respond. President White looked at the alien general on her screen and felt no fear. Throughout human space, 12,000 awakened minds were connected in ways the Council could not imagine. They shared strength and knowledge and purpose that transcended individual limitations. She activated her own transmission that would reach every ship in the Council fleet. General Thexmore, this is President Karen White speaking for humanity. We have considered your offer carefully and we must respectfully decline. Earth and all human colonies will remain free and independent. We suggest you reconsider your position. The President smiled the same enigmatic expression that Jake Morrison had worn in the Council chamber weeks ago. However, if you insist on demonstrating your military capabilities, we are prepared to show you what humanity has become. General Thexmore stared at the communication screen showing President White's confident expression and felt something he had not experienced in decades of military campaigns. Uncertainty. The human leader showed no sign of fear despite facing the largest military force in galactic history. Her smile suggested she knew something he did not. Begin the attack, the general ordered. Target their outer colonies first, Mars and Europa. Show them we are serious. Admiral Kesthor of the Zarathi fleet acknowledged the command and ordered his plasma cannon ships to open fire. Beams of superheated energy lanced across space toward the human settlements on Mars. The weapons carried enough destructive power to melt through planetary crust and boil away entire atmospheres. The plasma beams struck the Martian colonies and simply disappeared. On Mars, Nina Clark stood in the atmospheric processing center and felt the incoming weapons fire as ripples in the quantum field. She reached out with her consciousness and touched the plasma streams while they were still thousands of kilometers away. To her enhanced perception, the deadly energy was simply another form of matter that could be convinced to behave differently. Plasma beams struck an invisible barrier around Mars, and their energy was converted into harmless light that painted beautiful auroras across the planet's thin atmosphere. Nina had not blocked the attack. She had transformed it into something beautiful. Impossible, Admiral Kesthor hissed as his sensors showed zero damage to the human colonies. Our weapons struck the target, but there was no explosion, no destruction, nothing. General Thexmore watched his tactical displays with growing alarm. The most powerful weapons in the Zarathi arsenal had simply been negated by unknown human defenses. Fire again! Full power this time. The second attack consisted of concentrated fire from 50 plasma cannon ships. Enough destructive energy to crack a planet in half streamed toward the human settlements. Once again, the beams simply vanished as they approached their targets, leaving only patterns of colored light dancing in the Martian sky. Captain Steve Rogers stood on the bridge of Horizon's Edge and felt the Council fleet's confusion through the quantum field that connected all awakened humans. The alien commanders could not understand what was happening to their weapons. They had never encountered defenses that worked by transforming attacks rather than blocking them. "Should we respond?" asked his weapons officer, Lieutenant Dan Murphy. Rogers smiled and shook his head. "We don't need to respond. We just need to show them what we've become." He closed his eyes and reached out with his consciousness toward the Bay Council fleet. To his enhanced perception, each enemy ship appeared as a complex pattern of energy and matter held together by conventional physics. He could see their power cores, their weapon systems, their life support networks all operating according to predictable scientific principles. Rogers focused his attention on a single Council destroyer and began making subtle adjustments to its quantum field patterns. He was not attacking the ship or harming its crew. He was simply convincing its power systems to operate more efficiently. The destroyer's energy output increased by 300% without any input from its confused engineering staff. Then he did the same thing to 10 more ships, then 100, then 1,000. Throughout the Council fleet, power cores began operating at impossible efficiency levels while their crews watched in bewilderment. Ships that normally required constant maintenance were suddenly running perfectly. Weapons that should have needed charging were showing full power levels continuously. "What are they doing to us?" General Thexmore demanded of his science officers. "Unknown General, Our power systems are operating beyond design specifications, but there are no signs of external interference. It's as if our own ships are voluntarily improving their performance. Dr. Lisa Bennett monitored the engagement from her command center on Earth and felt pride in what humanity was demonstrating. The Awakened were not fighting the Council fleet in any conventional sense. They were showing the aliens that human consciousness could interact with matter and energy in ways that made traditional warfare obsolete. Engineer Alex Turner focused his abilities on a squadron of Vorthan shield ships. These vessels could project defensive barriers powerful enough to protect entire planets, but they required enormous amounts of energy to maintain their fields. Alex reached out through the quantum foam and began optimizing their shield generators at the molecular level. The Vorthan shields became stronger and more efficient while using half their normal power requirements. The alien crews watched their instruments with growing amazement as their technology performed far beyond its original capabilities. Some began to suspect their ships were being improved rather than attacked. On Europa, Susan Davis had been practicing her spatial manipulation abilities for months. She could perceive the structure of space-time itself and had learned to create temporary rifts that allowed instantaneous travel across vast distances. Now she decided to demonstrate this capability to the Council fleet. Susan opened a portal in space directly between Earth and the Council Armada. The rift was visible to every sensor in the alien fleet as a wound in reality itself that defied all known physics. Then she stepped through it and appeared simultaneously on the bridge of every Council ship. Thousands of Susan Davis materialized at once throughout the enemy fleet. She was not creating illusions or holograms, but actually existing in multiple locations simultaneously by folding space-time around her consciousness. Each manifestation spoke to the confused alien crews in their own languages. "We are not your enemies," she told the terrified Council officers. "We are showing you what consciousness can achieve when it evolves beyond the need for primitive tools." The alien crews stared in shock at the human woman who had somehow bypassed their shields and weapons and life support systems to appear directly on their bridges. Some reached for weapons, but found their hands would not obey their commands. Susan was not controlling them, but her presence in the quantum field made violence feel unnecessary and foolish. Matt Johnson turned his attention to the most dangerous vessels in the Council fleet. The Crystalline Collective had brought planet-cracking mining equipment modified for warfare. These ships could reduce entire worlds to cosmic dust in a matter of hours using focused gravitational fields that tore matter apart at the atomic level. Matt reached out with his consciousness and touched the gravitational projectors while they were still charging for their first attack on Earth. To his enhanced perception, the devices were simply machines that manipulated space-time according to mathematical principles. He began making adjustments to their operating parameters. Instead of generating destructive gravitational fields, the planet crackers began producing harmonious resonance waves that strengthened the quantum field connections between awakened humans. The weapons designed to destroy worlds became instruments that enhanced human consciousness and made the species even more powerful. General Thexmore realized his fleet was not under attack in any conventional sense. The humans were demonstrating abilities that transcended everything the Council understood about the nature of reality. They were not fighting back. They were showing the aliens that the concept of fighting was obsolete when one side had evolved beyond physical limitations. "All ships withdraw to safe distance," the general ordered. "Do not fire unless fired upon." But it was too late for tactical retreats. Tony Lewis had been observing the Council fleet's movements and decided to demonstrate humanity's ultimate capability. He reached out through the quantum field and began manipulating the space-time coordinates of individual enemy vessels. The Council fleet suddenly found itself transported to the far side of the galaxy in an instant. Thousands of ships disappeared from the battle zone without any visible means of propulsion or transition through hyperspace. They simply ceased to exist in one location and began existing in another. The remaining Council commanders watched in terror as their colleague vessels vanished into the void. Long-range communications confirmed the missing ships had arrived safely in a distant star system completely unharmed, but millions of light-years from home. "Recall all forces," General Thexmore ordered in a voice that shook with suppressed panic. "Signal the Council. Tell them humanity possesses capabilities we cannot comprehend or combat." President White opened a communication channel to the Council fleet, and her image appeared on every remaining enemy ship. Behind her stood Jake Morrison, Dr. Lisa Bennett, Admiral Carter, and dozens of other awakened humans whose consciousness now spanned the entire solar system. "General Thexmore," she said with the same calm confidence she had shown throughout the crisis. "Your weapons cannot harm us. Your ships cannot escape us. Your tactics cannot succeed against beings who have transcended the physical limitations that define your understanding of warfare." The president paused and looked directly into the alien general's compound eyes across the vast distance of space. "We could destroy your entire fleet without effort. We could transport every council world to the edge of the universe. We could convince your atoms to rearrange themselves into different patterns. But we choose not to because we have evolved beyond the need for such primitive responses to conflict." General Thexmore felt the weight of absolute defeat pressing down on his. 3 months after the failed invasion, President Karen White stood in the rebuilt council chambers on Nexus Prime and looked out at an assembly unlike any in galactic history. The curved seats that had once held arrogant species determined to maintain their dominance through force now hosted representatives eager to learn from humanity's transformation. The chambers themselves had been modified by human consciousness manipulation. Matt Johnson had worked with Crystalline Collective engineers to create walls that shifted color and pattern in response to the emotional states of the speakers. The architecture itself now encouraged honesty and cooperation rather than the intimidation that had characterized council proceedings for millennia. Jake Morrison took his place not as Earth's ambassador, but as the first human chancellor of the reformed Galactic Alliance. His appointment had been unanimous after the previous council structure dissolved voluntarily following humanity's demonstration of their capabilities. Even former Supreme Chancellor Zach Tarr had voted in favor, recognizing that the galaxy needed new leadership for a new age. "We gather today not as conquerors and conquered," Jake began, and his voice carried clearly through translation systems that had been improved by human quantum consciousness techniques. "We gather as species learning to move beyond the limitations that have defined galactic civilization for too long." In the months following the failed invasion, humanity had shared some of their quantum consciousness techniques with other species. The results varied dramatically. Some aliens could learn basic matter manipulation after years of training. Others showed aptitude for enhanced perception or limited spatial awareness, but none approached the natural ability that seemed to define human consciousness. Dr. Lisa Bennett had established quantum research centers on dozens of worlds, working with alien scientists to understand why humans were uniquely suited for consciousness evolution. Her preliminary findings suggested that human neural structure included quantum processing capabilities that had remained dormant until recent decades. "It appears that consciousness evolution requires a specific type of brain organization," she explained to the assembly. "Humans developed this structure through millions of years of survival challenges that required both individual creativity and collective cooperation. Other species evolved different advantages. The Zarathi, with their hive mind organization, could coordinate massive group activities, but struggled with individual consciousness expansion. The Saurian Empire's warrior culture had produced beings capable of incredible focus but limited ability to transcend physical reality. Each species had strengths that could contribute to